D is by itself. It's standalone, but it's Dr. D space Yvonne Young, but it's spelled like Ivan. But I don't get hung up on that. You know, as long as you call me and don't call me late to eat, we're good.
Okay. So, well, now see, this is another thing you learned by talking versus reading.
Really?
It's Dr. D. Yvonne? No, not Yvonne.
Yvonne? Yes, it's Yvonne, yes.
Well, you know, I have to say also by talking to you and hearing you talk, you have a very different perspective that I would have guessed by reading your website and by reading your posts. You have this ability somehow to be able to, in your posts, really get directly to the heart of the matter in a very, well, what they call in media, sound bites. And I don't know what they call it in social media. But you're able to really kind of get really right to what people need to know. But hearing you talk, I have to say, Doctor, that I didn't realize your clarity and your source and your spirit really seem to dictate a lot in your way of thinking, much more than I would have realized.
Well, yeah, something about building a brand, you have to be authentic. You cannot be this manufactured presentation, nor can you play to an audience. Not everybody's going to like you. I've had people lie on me. I've had people, whatever, and I used to get upset about it. And I've had people. As a matter of fact, one company even took the first book I wrote, Tired of Being Alone, and bootlegged it, meaning copied the book, print the cover. The only thing they did wrong was they left about 50 pages out of it, right? And a friend of mine even gave me one of the bootleg copies because I couldn't even find a copy of that book after it sold out. But there are things that are going to happen along your journey, and each one of those things is there to teach you about how other people do, how you see other people. Everything that someone else does that gets on your doggone nerves is something that's wrong with you, not them. Mm-hmm. The universe, your creator, is using even your irritants, even your setbacks and your misgivings and the places you fail for your own good. There is no such thing as a mistake in the life of a wise man. Charles Caleb Cotton made a statement. He said, a wise man can see more from the bottom of a pit than a fool can see from the top of a mountain. And Socrates said the unexamined life is a life that is not worth living. I believe that it is inherent that we examine our existence, that we not just subject ourselves or stumble through circumstances in life without searching for their deeper meaning. Even in the people that get on our damn nerves, the people that come to offend us, even those who come to do us harm, we have to stop and think, why is this? How did I attract this to my life? And if I didn't attract it, why did the universe allow it? You know, what am I supposed to learn? And it is, and even in fairy tales and myth, it's by going into the dark forest that you come out the other end changed. It's by going through death that you find resurrection. It is by loss that you find gain. It is through defeat that you learn the sweetness of victory. It is by being impoverished that you understand the value of sustenance and wealth. Without this dichotomous existence in which we live, we would never find success. And speaking again to creating success, don't try to create success. Be consistent. Do things for the right reasons. If you're going to write a blog, write it hoping and with the intent of it changing somebody's life. And don't write some crap. Go back and reread what you wrote. You know, you may have a few typos. God knows I do. But, you know, reread it and ask yourself, okay, should this sentence be where this sentence is or should I move it? Find a picture to go with it. And is this picture basically express what I just wrote? If you're going to do an interview and nobody wants to interview you, hell, get your own show. Interview yourself. Learn how to be on air for 30 minutes and do a monologue. And before you do it, do the research and think it out. And if you don't have but one listener and that's your mom or your wife or your husband, go ahead and do it because all of that is preparing you for a big stage. I remember being on a Barnes & Noble tour once, and I was always very quick with a response if someone asked me a question, but this particular date, and ironically, it's so funny, I lived in another city, and that store is right up the street from my house. Every time I drive by there, I just go, man, God has a sense of humor. But I remember that lady handed me a microphone. She said, well, here you go. Go ahead and speak. The store is packed. Go ahead and speak to the audience. And, I mean, it was literally over maybe a couple of hundred people that had come to this Barnes & Noble to see me. And I got that microphone. I just froze because I hadn't evolved to the point where you could hand me a mic yet. I had evolved to the point I could sit down and look really creative if you ask questions. And that showed me, I sat there and I picked up my own book and just started reading it. I couldn't think of nothing else to do. And I asked if anybody had questions, and thank God they did, because I would have really crashed and burned that day. But if I had not had that experience, I would never have thought, okay, well, there's another level of this. And then once one of my mentors was this little white guy that he and I shared a haircut alike named Wayne Dyer. And Wayne made a statement one day to me. He said, man, I don't write my speeches anymore. He said, and I asked why. And he said, well, I'm telling you that because you don't need to write them either. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, because you have a gift. He said, operate out your gift. He said, when you do it from a piece of paper, it's just as flat and stale as the paper. So ever since I was told that, I have never, and I've done keynote graduation speeches, and what nobody knew is I had touch points written down. I haven't written a speech in maybe 8 to 10 years. So every time you see me speak a lecture, even when I spoke at University of Sedona, I sat in the back of the room. I meditated, closed my eyes. I sensed everybody in the room. I sensed the spiritual, individual, and collective environment. I wrote down 5 touch points, and I got up and did a 20-minute speech. Or even when I did my TED Talk, I just did a TED Talk like maybe 3 months ago. Everybody thinks I wrote a speech. No, I didn't. That was off the top of my head, and I just created slides, and I'd look up at the slide and let my spirit lead me in what to say. So I'm saying that to those of you that are thinking about how do I do what Dr. Young did, the first thing I'm going to tell you is don't do what I did. How do you know that what God has for you isn't better than what he gave me? How do you know that the audience that I'm speaking to isn't the audience he called you to speak to? How do you know that my gifts aren't your gifts? I'll say, and God bless, I love you madly, damn it. Well, you can't say that. I've had people write me letters and say, you use God's name and you use the S word. And I said, well, yeah, I did. And they'll say, well, can't you do it without profanity? And I said, well, first, I didn't find that profane, and if you did, that's entirely your opinion. But why don't you go and look at Joel Osteen or Charles Stanley, because I'm not your guy. Because the people that follow me.
Say, you are a wonderful motivational speaker, and you're a very good communicator. I was friends with Wayne Dyer, and I considered him one of the best motivational speakers. And if you are going to be teaching and on stage, you have to have what you have, which is that confidence and the power of conviction. And I know he did connect with spirit. He had a lot of wonderful quotes he memorized as well that he always could pull upon, which I've never quite been able to do. But I have to ask you about that because, you exude confidence. And when I see you or read you, you really have this great confidence. And was that something you always had, or did you develop it, or did it evolve through your spiritual practice?
Honest answer to that question, I never thought that much of it. I knew this. I knew I couldn't be anybody but me. And I've known that all my life. And I think that epistemologically, meaning one concept has to happen before the other one can exhibit itself. As a child, I had to do the Easter speech at church. I remember being 7 years old, and I was teaching Sunday school at 7. And at 9 and 10, I was teaching a men's Sunday school class. Sometimes they would actually bring me in, and I remember they had this little game. I grew up in this Baptist church with a father that I thought may have been of Jesus' first cousin. The man was just really that cool, and they had this little game where you would sit in this chair, and they would ask a question, and if you didn't know the answer to it, you had to get up and the next person sit down, and no one could ever beat me at that game. It's like I had studied the Bible so much when I was, I think I was 9 or 10. I had read the Bible from cover to cover probably twice. And I remember I had this gift of just, one of my children, well, a couple of my children have it, where I just knew things. So the gift of discernment, the gift of clairvoyance. I was born with a veil over my face, and in a lot of Western East Indian cultures, they know that that's a sign that you have discernment, or you will be born with discernment, or what have you. But some of this stuff has nothing at all to do with confidence, and it's got a great deal to do with me just being and appreciating the moment. And I don't care if that moment is with 1 or 2 people. If that moment is with 4,000 or 5,000 people, there is no intimidation. I feel that another mentor of mine is this black minister named T.D. Jakes. And, and his right-hand guy is really more my mentor than him, this Lawrence Robinson. But he, they both told me, said, just do it. Just be. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. I make it like this interview right now. You have my undivided attention, and I just think it's another beautiful brick in a big walkway. And I've learned to not walk so quickly down the walkway that I miss the beauty of individual bricks. And being honest, how can you appreciate the individual bricks unless you become a brick maker yourself?
So beautifully put. You're an expert in relationship, and relationship is so key. How is the relationships you help people with, constantly helping, how is that similar or different than their relationship and your relationship with God?
It's not. Every relationship is a relationship with God, if I just be honest. It's however you treat anybody, that's how you're treating God, whether you want to believe that or not. God is using even your worst enemy, especially if somebody's getting on your doggone nerves, that's probably really God using that relationship. But whatever you're doing, whether you're doing business, dating, trying to have sex, trying to sleep well, it's a relationship. And I can make a real example. Like I spent a lot of money on my sleep system, on my bed. I have Tempur-Pedic pillows and a double pillow top Tempur-Pedic mattress because I knew I had a relationship with resting. I'm the advisor for the presidential initiative called My Brother's Keeper, so I have a relationship with the executive director. But I have a deeper relationship with the purpose behind why that thing exists. I have a relationship with the Kona in Hawaii. When I go down to that island, there are places I go that I have to go to pray. And one of them, this Dr. Dennis Delareyes took me to this place, and we out there, and, he knows wherever I go, I'm going to meditate and pray. And I found out later that place on that island was where they would let Hawaiians go 200 years ago when if they were accused of a crime or whatever, if they could make it to that island, it was a place of sanctuary. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know. One time I was down there with a lady named Swan Elliott who was working with my brand, and I would go to Living Stones, I think is the name of this church on that island, and I had this big cross in a Hawaiian old cemetery there, and I would go there every night and go pray. And one night, Swan said, "Did you see it?" And I said, "Well, did I see what?" And she said, "There was a big white woman standing by you, and she looked like an angel. And I could feel these angels around me." I knew the angel was there, but hell, if I had saw it, I probably would have run and took my little black button, jumped in her car, and left. But the truth of it is that there's